A civic movement grounded in the Constitution. Patriotism explained. Not right, not left, but straight ahead.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Patriot Party, where truth, transparency, and constitutional principles come before politics. The Patriot Party movement is focused on re-empowering we the people, restoring accountability, and putting America first through honest conversations and real solutions. America first, not America only, because we lead by example.
Today we're joined by retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Paul Darling, host of the War 102 podcast, author of Taliban Safari, and a lifelong student of military history and strategy. Through War 102, Paul teaches the doctrine, theory, and history of warfare while exploring how strategic principles can be applied far beyond the battlefield to business, leadership, sports, and everyday life. With nearly 3 decades of military experience and a passion for helping others think more strategically, we're looking forward to exploring how timeless principles of leadership, decision-making, and organizational effectiveness can help solve modern challenges. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely, Paul. Let's get started. I got a great interview. So, your podcast is called War 102, and one of your goals is to teach the doctrine, theory, and history of warfare while applying those lessons to business and everyday life. What inspired you to create the show, and why do you believe those principles are still relevant today?
Well, I was a member of the Tennessee State Guard, which is our state militia, and originally conceived as a mechanism for veterans to be a reserve for the state. And so few veterans signed up, they eventually opened it up, membership to anyone who was physically qualified. And I spent a lot of time, I was the Deputy Chief of Staff for operations, so I was responsible for operations and training, which was known as the G3. And I spent a lot of time at the drills explaining the basics of the military doctrine and theory and history, and a lot of positive feedback from that. And also, I wasn't getting my work done that I was supposed to when we drilled once a month. So I put together a podcast. I'm like, guys, just listen to this, and it'll provide a really good foundation. So that's one. And two, I looked at 20 years of losing wars to illiterate goat herders with frustration at a number of levels. First off, with our general officer and senior civilian leadership. Their competence was not demonstrated. And two, the unwillingness of the American population as a whole to seriously challenge what our senior military leaders and our civilian leaders were telling us was the direction. We are ignorant of war as a population. Now, we're ignorant of many things as a country, as far as the founding fathers, as far as, what is federalism? Who were the anti-federalists? Why do they matter? Why did we have a Bill of Rights? The foundation of this nation's system of government is one thing we're ignorant of, and I really appreciate your organization's desire to correct that. And I was looking at it from something I knew something about, which was war. I wanted to teach the average civilian how to think about war so that they could question intelligently decisions that were being made in their name and with their money, and with some of us, with our children's lives. So with that, I took the foundation of how I was taught war and redid it in a way that was more digestible to someone who didn't go to West Point for 4 years and had the fortunate formal military education that I did, but it would still allow them to look at a somewhat educated eye and go, this doesn't make sense. So someone who's looking at Iran and going, what are we doing? Why are we there? Who are we really supporting? And understanding how tactics and operational art and strategy and policy and grand strategy all nest, and that there is a hierarchy. And if there's a disconnect between one or the other, to quote Sun Tzu, and a quote I use in my podcast, is tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And so do we really have the coherent strategy which is driving our tactics, or are we just making noise before defeat?
So my question would be around what you just said. We try to be a solutions based. So you're saying that you think there was somewhat of a disconnect in the leadership, correct? It was there was something going on. There was things weren't being. Is that what you were saying? Like there was.
I think more of what I was saying is I think the leaders were united in all the wrong premises. Our grand strategy was incorrect, and from that flowed bad policy and bad strategy, and then operations, and then ultimately our tactics. And we made mistakes at every level, and we did some things correctly at every level. But at the end of the day, we spent 20 years developing an Afghan national security force that fell apart against a far numerically inferior Taliban in a matter of days. Didn't even survive weeks. We spent hundreds of billions of dollars creating this entity that just completely crumbled. Now, there's no one failure that is going to cause that. That's a number of failures. But
no, I don't really want to talk about the failures. What I want to talk about is the solutions.
Sure.
So I'm sitting here and I'm listening to what you're saying, and a couple of things come to mind. One thing, we're big into education. We always say an informed citizenry is the ultimate checks and balances. So citizens need to be informed, and they need to be able to critical think, and that's why we've introduced that back into the education system. But also, I think with modern technology and what we're doing, one of the things is transparency. If our citizens knew how to critically think, knew about strategy, and it was transparent on all the misgivings of what was going on in the government at the time, then we could demand a better outcome of the people that we elect and put in office. But we don't know. Things are made in a black box, and decisions are made, and we never know about it.
Well, I think there was some understanding of. So I talk about the levels of war. So the very highest level is the grand strategy, that multi-generational grand scheme that transcends administrations, that is a uniting principle to the American government. We have a hard time with grand strategy because we change administrations. And what one party may see as a grand strategy, another party may not. So within the global war on terrorism, our grand strategy nested upon a fundamental assumption that Islam was inherently peaceful. And from that flowed a policy of regime change. If you remove malignant actors, then the peaceful nature of Muslims will come forth, and you won't have problems in the Middle East. That was the fundamental grand strategy assumption, that removing dictators in the Middle East would bring peace. And that assumption, and we took that as gospel, and I think a lot of people had misgivings about that as an assumption, but weren't willing to express their doubts about it. And so we removed dictators throughout the Middle East. We've removed Assad. We removed Gaddafi. We removed Saddam Hussein. We removed temporarily the Taliban. We're looking at, I think the Trump administration has realized the folly of reshaping organizations, but he'd like to see a change in the IRGC and into a different government. So with the understanding that toppling dictators does not bring peace, I think we've moved on to that. What does? And then look at the successful, and successful is relevant. Who are the successful Middle Eastern governments? From an American perspective, who are, if not our allies, at least not antagonistic to American policy?
I mean, from what I saw, and obviously it wasn't from a strategic, inside view like you had, but from somebody on the outside looking in, it always seemed like, that method, it was almost like a hydra. You cut one head off, two grow back, and it would create a vacuum. And that's where the terrorists would come up. We try to, throw out one leader, and then it would create a vacuum of terrorists. But don't you think, like, some of that, some of it's just human error, and we look back on it and say, well, now with hindsight, we could have done much better. And that's one of the things, that we're one of the intelligence layers that we have on the prototype federal policy producer that we're going to build onto the public-facing one, is historical bill comparisons, things that have worked, things that haven't worked, so you can look at everything with hindsight. Because now with technology, you can look at what's worked over the past 500 years, and it connects all the patterns and the data without human emotion in it. Because some things are better without human emotion, some things.
Right. And so this goes back to, I've done 2.5 years of War 102. And Clausewitz is one of the primary strategic thinkers about war, philosophers of war, doctrine writers. And he talks about what he calls the fascinating trinity. I call it a paradoxical trinity, in that war is governed by three primary things. You have cold, hard politics. What are you trying to achieve as a national objective through the use of force? And then you have raw passion, where you have the violence that comes from the hatred and animosity that drives mortal combat. You're killing people. That invokes a passionate response, a human element, which transcends logical outcomes. And so you have, so those are two almost diametrically opposed aspects that both are constantly working within war. And then the third one is chance. War is a very complex human endeavor, and things can happen which are completely unforeseeable. And so you combined cold, hard, political, realpolitik objectives with the passion that comes from killing, with the random chance that happens in any human interaction, especially one as complex. So what you end up with in Clausewitz's paradoxical or fascinating trinity is war is an unpredictable endeavor. No matter how much you try to predict it, it'll always be a slave to these three opposing forces that drive it all the time. So what does all that mean for us? It means when you embark upon conflict of any kind, but especially war between nation states, is you cannot predict the outcome. It's impossible. You can look at history, you can look at examples and try to divine those things which are universalities, which I try to do in my podcast, but always accept that there is a random aspect to it which is completely unpredictable.
Well, I mean, look at just, even on a much smaller scale, you can't predict a boxing match, you can't predict a UFC fight, you can't predict a football game on a much smaller scale. And that's when people are literally kind of going to war, not really like you're talking about, but physical war.
But you have two people within a confined space, under a governed set of rules,
Yeah.
and still Buster Douglas knocks out Mike Tyson.
You still can't figure it out. So let me get to the next question. You've spent nearly 3 decades studying and serving in military leadership. Looking beyond the battlefield, what leadership principles do you think businesses, nonprofits, and even local communities most often overlook?
I think the biggest understanding is that as a leader, everyone you lead is fundamentally different, which means you have to, if you want optimum outcomes from organizations that you lead, you have to treat every single person who works for you differently. Not unfairly, but differently, which means you have to invest the time to understand their motivations, where they're comfortable, where they're not comfortable, develop a team that has the right mixture of common culture, but also diversity of thought and abilities, which allows a team to thrive. You can't have a team of linebackers. You have to have speed, you have to have size, you have to have, if not speed, then quickness. Maybe you need length and height. Maybe you need stoutness, and then adjust your organization to the tools that you are given. If you have a fantastic nose guard, but you're a 4-3 kind of defensive coordinator, well, you can't do the 4-3. You're going to do a 3-4, or you're going to get rid of that nose guard who may be a fantastic athlete, but you can't change how you operate to match the strengths and weaknesses that you have been given. So that's the one side. On the other side is if you treat everyone differently, you open yourself up to risk as a leader, where you may get it wrong. You may do something that you think is exactly what that employee wants to thrive and to be most successful, and you may get it wrong. And they'll say, well, you treated me differently than everyone else. I said, well, I always treat everyone differently from everyone else because everyone is an individual. I try to treat you all fairly. And you expose yourself to risk as a leader. When I say you should treat everyone differently, all the little HR drones, they shrivel up and they go fetal and they start crying, because in HR world, you treat everyone exactly the same. And the only thing that'll do is get good performance out of one person and suboptimal performance out of everyone. Leadership involves risk.
Well, and I can kind of, put this into our education program and I think add some good insight to what you're talking about. Because one of the things, when we talk about AI, one of our big thing is humans create, AI enhances, humans decide. AI is in the middle. It's not taking anybody's job. It's just enhancing humans, making them more, optimal and able to do a better job and do more, do it more efficiently. We say that every employee should have an AI assistant, and every executive should have a strategic advisor. Well, the AI that we have, once we fully scale, it will learn how the students learn best. And that's how it will evolve from year to year, and it can even individualize, per student and help them depending on how they learn. So, it may be something in the future that's integrated into HR that allows people to, allows you as the boss or the leader to communicate better and on an individual basis without actually having to change your leadership style. The AI kind of mitigates everything.
It's possible. I use AI. I think all of us do to a certain degree. I'm not intelligent enough on it. I do have Luddite tendencies. I know people lean heavily on technology as the next leap forward, but as someone who studies war, which is a human activity, I'm not familiar or comfortable enough with the models that I've worked with to say what the limits are of its ability to enhance our ability as leaders to deal with people.
Well, and a lot of that stuff, they're still going through governance stuff. A lot of that stuff, it's the next few years is gonna hold a lot of stuff. I mean, literally, they can't see around the corner. They're learning so fast that even the people that create them can't see around the corner because not only do you not know, they don't even know. 6 months from now, we could have a whole different model, and 2 years from now, it'll be something completely different. So, that's one of the things on the way we try to design systems. So we're not dependent on one AI. We use modular intelligence. So literally, we can, every software has a strength and it has a weakness. You can't have one software that has all strengths. That's why there's so many different ones. So by the design that we have, we're not reliant on one AI. We can send different tasks into different AIs depending on their strengths. So we don't have to, we can go into 20 or 30 different AIs depending on their strength with the way we design our software with the modular intelligence. That way each one can give their strength without giving their weakness. Anyway, let me get to this next question. So your work frequently discusses concepts like strategy, friction, and the fog of war. How can those ideas help people make better decisions when they're facing uncertainty in business, public service, or life?
Well, so the friction and fog, so in combat is definitely different because it's happening so fast. Decisions have to be made in a matter of minutes. The tyranny of time in business is not as great, but it's still there. So the shorter the duration you have to assemble information and make intelligent decisions, the more you're going to have that fog of war, the uncertainty of the information which is being presented to you. And with Clausewitz, who created the concepts of friction and fog of war, he talked about what was called the coup d'oeil, the stroke of the eye, the ability of some leaders to discern the critical information from all this contradictory, incomplete information being presented and focus on the one or two key things that have to be accomplished within that short time frame in order for the overall success of whatever it is you're trying to do. You develop a coup d'oeil, one, by just, you do have to have some base level of intelligence. And two, you need experience. So back to the business side is Clausewitz talks about the criticality of senior leaders to have combat experience. You have to be immersed in combat multiple times in order to truly understand it. It is not something that can uniquely be developed through reading, through study. It's impossible. I think business would benefit from that. The number of stories you hear about CEOs coming in with an MBA and zero experience in the company or even the industry in which they're leading, thinking that these universal principles that they learned at Wharton are automatically going to make a successful company, I think is wrong. I think it's false, and I think a lot of the downfalls that we see in American business is driven by MBAs who have one or two plays, namely fire every American over the age of 40 and hire an H-1B. That seems to be playbook number one. And then playbook number two is to offshore every bit of manufacturing until the only thing that's made in America is a nameplate, which is slapped on a piece of equipment made in India or China, Indonesia, but selling it at a premium of an American-made product. That seems to be the universal MBA playbook, and it's destroying American manufacturing and it's destroying American companies. So, to the point is, I'm not going to fight the MBA mafia here, but you're far better off, and you look at McDonald's as a great example. McDonald's was famous for hiring internal people who worked their way up and made McDonald's a monster of a company. And in the past decade or so, they just hire any MBA from any company who, as long as they got the stock price juiced for 3 months, obviously was a genius. It's destroying companies. It's destroying the nation. It's destroying hope for people who want to have jobs.
You know, it's funny. So I've been an entrepreneur for 26 years. I opened my first brick and mortar while I was in college full time when I was 19. So I'm running the register while I'm studying college books. But I definitely don't have a degree or an MBA in business. I don't have a degree in business. My ex-wife did, and when we did a business, she took her lead from me. Some things you just can't learn out of a book. It's the experience. It's what you're born with. And I've always said, if I'm going to talk to somebody, let's just give an example of climbing Mount Everest. I don't want to talk to the guy that wants to talk about the theory. I want to talk to the guy who's been up there and come back down. Let's talk to the guy who's done it, not the one who wants to talk about doing it. Let's talk to the one who's already done it.
Agreed.
Okay, so you've also advocated for reforms within the Department of Defense and have spoken about improving organizational effectiveness. If you could implement one practical change that would make large organizations more effective, whether military, government, or private sector, what would it be and why?
Well, the people who do have to have the power to make decisions. And so within Department of, we'll call it war now, so the Department of Defense was created in 1947. Previous to that, we had the Department of War and Department of the Navy. And these were both cabinet-level positions. They reported directly to the president, the Secretary of War and the Secretary of the Navy. They reported directly to the president. There was no Secretary of Defense. In 1947, we created the Department of Defense, which created the Air Force. So then you had Department of Defense, and underneath that, you have the Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Navy, and the Secretary of the Air Force. And what that did was the Department of Defense has the mission to fight wars. The Department of the Army, the Department of the Air Force, Department of the Navy has no requirement to fight wars. All they do is what's called man, train, and equip. They develop the forces that are then given to what we call the Geographic Combatant Commanders, the GCCs. And we present them, the services, present them with force options to conduct their mission. What that means is the people who fight the war have no decision whatsoever in the manning, the training, and the equipping of the forces which they use to fight that war. And that is it bore bitter fruit all throughout GWOT, and it's bearing bitter fruit now in the Strait of Hormuz. The Navy went on this crusade of DEI and BMD, ballistic missile defense. They built ships called the littoral combat ships, ironically, specifically to fight the war that we're currently doing in the Strait of Hormuz, that no one who actually fought wars in CENTCOM, Central Command, which is responsible for the Middle East, Central Command, no one wanted littoral combat ships. No one. That was a Navy initiative. But now the CENTCOM commander, who ironically is a naval surface warfare officer, is being forced to fight with equipment that he would never have chosen. But we spent 20 years spending hundreds of billions of dollars on equipment that no one who actually fights wars wanted.
What's the fix? What do we implement so that doesn't happen again?
So the fix to that is we need to dissolve the Department of the Army, Department of the Air Force, and Department of the Navy. And we need to create mission secretaries. We need to have a secretary for expeditionary warfare and a secretary for strategic warfare. They would be given the funding, and they would dictate to the services, I need a capability to do X. And the services would come back and say, I propose that our service man, train, and equip a force that can conduct this specific mission that you need done, and I'm requesting your funding to do it. So the people who actually are responsible for fighting the wars have control over the funding and the procurement to fight those wars. The secretaries, the service secretaries, have failed.
You got to go enter that in when we get off the show at some point in the federal policy producer. I just love to hear what kind of legislation it spits out when somebody with your experience goes in and enters a solution and it picks up on it and spits it out. I just love to see what as a test case to see what it does, or to hear about what it does. Right. So many veterans struggle with transitioning from military service into civilian life. Based on your own experiences, what advice would you give to veterans and really anyone who is trying to reinvent themselves after a major life transition?
Man, I still haven't figured it out. And maybe the advice is you might not figure it out quickly. I think one of the hardest things we have as people is to truly be honest with ourselves about what we want, about what our priorities are. I prioritize my family and their financial well-being. My wife and I both grew up with not a lot of money, and our parents were always in debt. Money was always an issue. My wife, both of us went through some very scary financial times in our childhood. This scarred us. So I took jobs that maybe I wasn't the most interested in because it was the job presented and it was enough money. And I don't regret it, but it certainly doesn't lead to fulfillment. And you have to be honest. And I don't think it was a wrong decision. In retrospect, I don't, because my financial concerns overweighed my desire to have jobs that I liked. And I really liked the military. I enjoyed being a soldier. And
I mean, that's an American story. How many people have to work jobs, hand to mouth to put food on the table, to get in a better position, not something they necessarily want to do. Ideally, if you love what you do, you never have to work another day in your life. But how many people get to do that? That's an American story, whether it happens when you're a child or, a teenager or an adult. So many people run into some very, very bad financial situations.
And I think we have a cultural problem with that. We do measure people by their income to a bad degree. I think we're seeing a change in respect for those who work hard. We had it for a long time, that Protestant work ethic. We destroyed that deliberately and negatively. There's different cultures have different admirable things, but one of the things I admire about Japanese culture is that if someone does a job well, that is worthy of cultural respect, regardless the income they make. And some people who don't make very much money are still greatly respected in Japanese society because they are good at what they do, even if they don't reap disproportionate financial success for their excellence. I think we just need to respect people who work hard, even if they don't make a lot of money, so they can be proud of their small house and their used truck, and their kids can say, hey, my dad's a plumber, and not be embarrassed by it. And so that man, as long as his wife and his kids respect him and love him, that's all he needs. And I think we've gotten away from that. And we need to bring that back, a culture of respect for people who work hard.
Well, I don't even think it's just that. See, one of the things when I started this movement, I said, we're trying to push substance, not superficiality. And I think as a society, I don't even know when it went back to, whether it's holding yourself to the standards of back in the 80s or, 90s of the stick figure women or whatever it be, trying to hold yourself to that unattainable standard, that was pushed out. And I think that maybe got people to look down on people that were doing good jobs, that were doing things. And that's just one of the effects of being more superficial than you are about substance. The substance of this guy goes out here, he works hard every day, he picks up trash, but what would you do with your trash if he didn't pick it up? We need to appreciate that.
We denigrate the working man and we denigrate the mother. And
one thing we did, wasn't much. We don't make a lot of money, but when we moved into our new house and they picked up all that extra trash, we took about Dairy Queen gift cards. The trash guys, they came out a couple of weeks and did a bunch of extra work. We took them out Dairy Queen gift cards, just to say thank you. I think more people need to do that. They can.
I agree. I live rural. I just built my house, and finding skilled tradesmen who are here legally was a challenge. And I tried to, and sometimes it didn't work out. But I tried my hardest to find those guys who were in the trades, who were trying to hang their own shingle, and provide them the opportunity to earn good money to take care of their families.
Man, I tell you, we're going through a nightmare right now with some construction. Just finding skilled labor at all is hard in this day and age, I'm telling you.
It's tough because at the end of the day, when you have a huge illegal workforce, these guys are skimming benefits because they're not declaring their income. They're getting paid cash under the table. The employers are not responsible for their health care. If anything happens to them, they just walk into a ER and they get treated. And it's hard to denigrate the men doing the work because the illegal crews work their butts off. I've seen it.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, unfortunately, our experience is with a veteran who, brought in other workers, but it's been a nightmare. It has. And then the other experience I had, which was a really bad experience, was with I haven't had any experiences with foreign workers. I've only had experience with American workers, and they haven't gone good.
I had my drywall crew did not work out well, and I went through 2 drywall crews, and we have some cultural issues we need to address.
We do. So, our audience always appreciates practical takeaways. If someone listening today wanted to become a better strategic thinker and leader, what are 3 habits they could begin practicing immediately?
Study your profession, whatever it is. Understand the principles that created that industry, whatever it is. Second thing is understand the work on the ground. I did manufacturing for many years after I retired. You have to be on the floor, seeing the machinists work, the welders, whatever you're dealing with, the electricians, the electricians, not necessarily the electrical engineers. I was responsible for the engineers, but you got to be on the floor, willing to listen as they present their challenges and their opportunities, because the guys doing the work are going to have the best insight on what's going wrong and what's going right and how to make it better. And I think a lot of college-educated people, such as myself, who have very little hands-on experience, are hesitant to get down there and admit their ignorance because they're in a position of authority over people who clearly know more than they do. And to have the humility to go in and say, look, I got all the degrees and for whatever reason, I make more than you do, but I'm really relying upon your help so I can make your job easier. And you got to be on the floor. One, you have to understand the theory. You got to be good at what you are supposed to do. If you're an electrical engineer, you better understand electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, whatever. The second thing is get on the floor, get at the point at which things are happening and learn from them. Whether those are soldiers, if they're a machine gunner, hey, take me through this. What are the issues that you're having? Is there any supply deficiency that you have? Is there any training deficiency you have? How can I make your life better? How can I make you more effective at what you do? What would that take? And sometimes you got to say, look, I get that. I can't make that happen, but I might be able to make this happen. So those are 2 things. And again, I would go back to get to know your people, invest time in listening to them so that you understand how to keep them moving at the best pace for them and for the organization. You're not burning them out, but you're also challenging them in a positive way so that they feel good about what they do.
Yeah, I like that. And I don't think you have to really hurt your pride. You can easily defer to them and say, hey, your way looks way more efficient than mine. Show me what you're doing.
Yeah, boy, the thing is, the more incompetent you are, the more difficult that is. I'm supremely arrogant. So much so that if I don't know something, it's clearly a fault in the universe and not a fault with me. So admitting I don't know something comes very easily because I'm already perfect. But if you have some doubts about yourself, it's a bit emasculating to go to someone and go, I don't know anything. Can you help me out here? It takes self-confidence, and humility comes from being strong in who you are, in your self-perception.
Absolutely, you have to know your limits. I try not to talk to people if I don't know something, I'm gonna tell you I don't know. Now I might say, well, give me a day or 2 to look into it, and I'll get back with you. But if I don't know it, I don't know, and I don't like talk to people when they'll just make it up. And then if I take their word, I look bad when I'm talking to somebody else because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: if there's one lesson from military history that you believe America should better understand today, not necessarily about war itself, but about leadership, preparation, or resilience, what would it be and why?
You can't learn it all from a book. And I'll throw. I think the military understands this to a certain degree. We go through some very realistic, hard training. I'm going to throw this at the State Department. Those guys have never been on the ground to see the destruction their good idea fairies have wreaked across the globe. And we paid, I would say 70% of our failures in the global war on terror were created by a State Department trying to play Barbie dollhouse with real people, with real cultures and real countries, trying to create some, Columbia University ideal fantasy world instead of knowing what the real world is about. And it got a lot of people killed, and it's still getting people killed today.
Okay, well, I don't want to finish on that note. So let's flip this back to the solutions part. If you had to come up with a solution to help with what you're saying right there, what would that be? What would the fix be?
Honestly, I don't think State Department can be fixed. I think we have a far too big a State Department. I think our embassy staffs are too big. I think our foreign area officers, or the career State Department.
So you're saying we need to dissolve it and reinvent it. It needs to be reinvented.
I think so. I think how we recruit, retain, and train our foreign service officers needs to be completely redone. We spend a fortune, more than all other countries probably combined, on foreign aid, on goodwill, and the world hates us. What are we getting for our money? What are these State Department experts gaining us? We are the greatest, most benevolent country in history, and the world hates us. And I think State Department is populated largely by a bunch of people who hate the country they're supposed to represent, and that they are at the forefront and the vanguard of denigrating the United States as some way of ingratiating themselves with more college-educated idiots.
Yeah, and the dissolving and reinventing it definitely, on that end probably needs to be done. But as far as going to what you said, as far as the world hating us, don't you believe? I'm not saying all of it, because obviously we've throughout history butted our nose into things that maybe we shouldn't have, that maybe didn't turn out the best. But don't you think maybe it's partly the media's fault for the way they polarize, spin, and make everything make America look,
Unquestionably, the media shapes that. But that, are we going to deny that the media is to a large degree integrated with governments?
They are. That's why we're launching. We're building a newsroom at the end of this year called Truth Matters News. What we know, what's been independently verified, what's not been confirmed, what the confidence levels are of anything, and then you decide. We're not trying to manipulate the narrative or polarize it. We want to give facts, and then you decide what you think.
Sure, but to the media, I'd say the media is reflecting what the self-proclaimed elites are dictating. I don't see any differences between Reuters news editorials and what's coming out of Brussels with the EU, or what's coming out of... But don't you think
it's on a... If you look at... All right, so let's look at it from a systems level, a systems perspective. What are you paid for? What is Google? What is social media? They pay for outrage. They pay for clicks. They pay for knee-jerk. They don't pay for substance. They pay for... So the way we process information, the way we buy information, which was the easiest... That was the easiest thing to... Outrage was the easiest thing to monetize. So we have literally monetized outrage into society, and that's what people get paid for. And until we say, okay, we're going to do something a little bit different to process information, just a little bit different, we're going to have a problem in the systemic at the base level of information altogether.
So I would throw back to that is the media is willing. By the media I mean the mainstream media, which Google just quotes whatever they want to from it. they are willing to accept a loss in viewership, in revenue ad, to perpetuate their worldview of America sucks. So you look at the viewership of CNN, you look at the viewership, you look at MSNBC, which is now had a rebrand to MS Now. No one reads the New York Times. No one's reading the Washington Post. But their adherence to this narrative is more important than actually the business that they're doing. So they're not doing it for outrage. They're doing it to forward a worldview which shaped our global war on terrorism policy. It's the same overall overarching failure.
But as a business, they've got to be doing something. I don't know if it's doing it just to if they're going to lose money just to shape the worldview. I mean, they still got to answer to shareholders. I think they're floundering because you've got these. Technology has made it where you can build a newsroom for next to nothing and have a fast streaming news channel on Samsung and Amazon and Roku and everywhere. And these old entities are bloated, and they're for millions. You can build something that used to cost billions, and they're just. I think they're floundering, and they're just trying to figure out where they fit, if they fit at all, or if the independent creators are going to come flip them on their head.
And I'm not smart enough on the industry to know that so many of the stories come from the Stringer, the AP, Reuters. I think those are privately held. I don't think those are publicly owned companies. And I think of the newsrooms that are publicly held, they're publicly held as part of a grand, much larger company, which is willing to accept losses in its newsroom as long as it's offset in other ways. But then you look at like Washington Post, which is basically the personal blog of Jeff Bezos. The New York Times is privately owned. And so like Fox is part of a much larger organization. CNN, I'm not sure their ownership. I don't think they're publicly held. I don't know.
Didn't they just lay off like 10 or 15% of their employees? A bunch they laid off, I think.
Well, I mean, really, what they do there's AI. They're basically AI. In the old model of ABC, NBC, CBS, all three of them reported the exact same news in the exact same way. The only difference was who was the anchor. And so who the anchor was became the only differentiation from the three major news sources. So that's all they cared about. None of them reported anything from a unique viewpoint. Only Fox News really has any sort of variance from the narrative. And that's why Fox News is most successful.
Yeah, I mean, but it's still, if you look at it, they still swing very conservative. I mean, that's their base is very conservative. I don't swing one way or another. I try to keep it as unbiased as possible. But yeah, I mean, I just think on the whole way we process information, all the way from the platforms like Google and all this, Facebook and everybody, the way, especially X, what is really paid for and monetized is outrage. So we have
that's true
on the
yes, X, Facebook, all of that, the algorithms. But the algorithms is taken out of human. So if you click on one thing and you post this is complete BS, you're going to see 100,000 more of those because you clicked on it, not because you agree or disagree with it. So, but those are algorithms driving that online engagement. I don't think the legacy media, I don't think any media should be driven by algorithms, and they're not doing unique
But those
reporting.
are driven by profit. If the algorithms drive the views give them more money, and they are driven by profit. So they want those views, so they want to go with outrage.
But Google has no news. Facebook has no news. All they do is take the news that is available from other sources, that is created from other sources, and present it on their website. So if they had a greater diversity, like, that Google is not putting on its recommended news feed anything that is conservative. It should, but it doesn't. So
yeah, I think one option would be, what I've looked at or even juggled around is at some point if somebody offered a platform or if the other platforms, you make a base monetization for any post, whether it's viral, whether it's outrage or whatever. But then there's a multiplier. There's multipliers for things that are of substance, that are truth, that are that promote the things that society really doesn't need so much outrage. Pressure burst pipes, man. We got to let some pressure off.
I agree, but then how are you going to stop the same forces that have created the current environment from manipulating that future environment? Why wouldn't they incentivize the most outrage, even if it's incorrect, if it's purely profit driven?
Well, that's why I said, we have to, at some point we have to push back a little bit with something that will gear us towards getting back on track. I think a big issue too, one of the big issues you see right now is we can't agree on the facts. You have one group that says 10 million immigrants are coming over the border. You got another group that says no immigrants are coming over the border. We can't even talk about a solution because we're living in two different realities. So until we can agree on facts, we're going to have a hard time coming up with solutions.
Well, it took multiple generations to get to this place. There are no easy fixes.
No, that's why we started this. Multiple things, put multiple entities moving in the same direction towards truth, transparency, and the Constitution. We've called it a non-violent generational reset. I'm trying to build all this stuff, and then I'm just going to hand it off for the next generation so it can continue because we have to do something.
The fact that you're focusing at the middle school and high school is perfect because we have.
Yeah, I think college is too late.
Oh yeah, it is too late. We have to teach these kids how to think. We have to, and not only how to think, but that there are some inherent truths. We hold these truths to be self-evident. There are truths in the world, in human society. Some things are better than others. Some things are good. Some things are evil. There are absolutes. And we can't just tell a third grader, well, no one can tell what's true or not. No, you really can. And these kids have to have a foundation. These kids have to have a foundation of facts. And from there, then you slowly incorporate the idea of empathy and looking at it from different perspectives, understanding that the change in perspectives doesn't make someone bad. It may make them wrong, but they're not necessarily bad. But we're teaching these kids very early on that there is no truth, there is no facts. Everything is wrong except for me. Of course, the teacher themselves are never wrong. It's horrible.
Well, I mean, like in our curriculum, not only have media literacy, but so in middle school, they get given historical topics. Once they've been trained in debate in high school, they get given like hot topics, like what's in the news right now, abortion, whatever, Supreme Court cases. And one side gets given the originalist side. One side gets given the living. They have to debate, no raising voices, no cursing. The teacher is the moderator. That way they see what resonates best with them, at an early age, so they can make informed decisions.
Yeah, I did debate in high school. I was actually a state champion at it. And
really?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if this is, so I was a state champion in what's called spontaneous argument, where they'd give you a subject and they'd give you a side. You had 30 seconds to formulate your position, and then it was like 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1 off of 30 seconds of prep. It was chaos.
Wow, that does sound intense.
I was always much better when I was forced to take a position I did not personally agree with, because it forced, well, one, I already knew the arguments of my opponent, and two, it really forced me to look with empathy at the opposing position and understand their ideas exceptionally well, and knowing what the opponent was going to come after me with. So it put me in a great position. I had a lot of fun with it. And then some of my kids did debate when they were in high school as well. So I'm a huge fan of being able to debate respectfully and disagree respectfully.
Absolutely. I came up in a house of lawyers. All the men were lawyers except for me, and all the women were teachers. And one of the first things that I was taught is a good lawyer should be able to argue both sides of the argument. They shouldn't just be arguing one side. They should be able to argue both sides. You may argue one side better because you believe in it, but you should be able to competently argue both sides.
I think that's why conservatives have an easier time in open debate. I think a lot of liberals are not exposed to conservative viewpoints. They're exposed to conservative caricatures. And whereas if you have a conservative viewpoint, you are inundated in the culture with the liberal viewpoint. If you have a conservative viewpoint in the United States, in the Western world across the board, it's because you have intellectually made that decision in spite of the incessant forwarding of what I'd say is a predominantly liberal viewpoint. It's certainly liberal in education. It's inarguable. Certainly within colleges, then I would argue within the high school curriculums, in the books that they choose and things like that in the social studies. And then the media. Conservative media consists of watching what CNN says and then rebutting it. CNN consists of saying what they want to say while denigrating but never reporting on what the conservative media world is saying. So is it a biased viewpoint? Yes, but I think it's still accurate.
But I tell you, this is from a personal experience. The media has a lot of things twisted. I know it doesn't have all of them, but I went out to visit my daughter. Her husband's stationed at the Air Force Base in San Francisco. Last year I went to visit her. She's an artist, and she's in California, and she was setting up an art festival. So, there was all I come from Louisiana. It's a red state. There's very liberal art people in California. I was helping her set up. I got to talking to them about, this is before everything got built. This was last year before we started building everything. This was when it was just the Patriot Party. And we were working on curriculum. And I started talking to them about constitutionality and the Patriot Party and all that. And all these people they were getting into it, these artists, they were like, yeah, we just want to be able to agree to disagree on a few issues. We're on the same mind wave on a lot of things. The media doesn't portray it that way. And these are a bunch of different artists in California saying this. They're like, we wish we could just agree to disagree on a few things. The media's got it twisted. And I'm like, wow. Because, this is like in the most liberal part of California with art people setting up at the festivals. And they were all about it. I'm like, wow.
I've seen some of that, but I've seen just as much with people who I've known for years that I consider friends, who you disagree with them, you're just evil, and they don't. And you'll hear, well, I can't argue with fascists. I'm like, I've known you for 10 years, dude. I'm not a fascist, but if you disagree, I think that much of the discord it goes on that direction as it does. Hey, we just want to get along.
Or at least agree to disagree. Hey, can we just agree to disagree on this?
The murder of Charlie Kirk, exposed a lot of it. And there's a dude who really just wanted to talk through issues. And not just that he was murdered, but how many people in public positions said he deserved it, who rejoiced in his murder for a guy who actually wanted to have an honest dialogue.
No, I think that was awful. That's awful, and anybody that supports murder of anyone, even if you don't agree with it. Now, I'm not saying if somebody's getting the death penalty, but even if you don't agree with it, then we just have to push back. That's not right. That's not right.
But we didn't push back from a lot of circles. A lot of circles like, well, Charlie Kirk deserved it because he was a hate monger, and I'm like, that's not true. And this is back to the media example. That wasn't outrage. That was an expression of their belief that Charlie Kirk deserved what happened to him. And
yeah,
if Charlie Kirk,
they were taking clips, and they were from 10 years ago, like a 10-second clip without the whole narrative around it. After he died, and misrepresenting some of the stuff that he had actually said. And that's media, and that's social media for sure.
And the people doing that knew the full context. That was a deliberate denigration of the person. Like when they talked about Trump and calling neo-Nazis very fine people. That was a lie. The people propagating that lie knew it was a lie and propagated it anyways. So
it took me 6 months of arguing with people that I am not a Nazi. This is not a political party. This is a civic movement to re-empower the people. Because that's everybody, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, you're this, you're that. I'm like, no, this is nonpartisan. We don't care what party you vote for, as long as you vote. This has nothing to do with politics. But, people, and I say this too, I read a book years ago, and it talked about how we had a 30-second attention span. Because, commercials back in the day, before social media and stuff, everything was geared towards 30 seconds. Super Bowl, every commercial is there. So it said you have a 30-second attention span. If you want to do an elevator pitch, you got to do it in 30 seconds. I'd say now with the swipe, we got maybe 1 or 2 seconds to grab somebody's attention.
Well, you're not wrong. So I guess you're mid-40s?
Yes, 45.
Yeah, so I'm about 10 years older than you. And, I clearly remember the pre-internet, growing up in the pre-internet age.
Yes.
And I love the internet. But I think we were better off without it. Of all the benefits, I don't think as a society it has brought out what is best
I think we have a chance to reinvent that, though, and that's why I say
I hope so.
This is what when I'm talking to people about AI, I literally say, okay, well, it's not a matter of if it's going to touch your life, because countries around the world are dumping trillions of dollars into this, and they don't do that for something they're not going to push on everybody. So we got two choices. We can sit back and let a small group of people define what everybody else is going to use and how governance is going to be and everything. Or the people can demand a seat at the table, and things can be built. That's a lot of our stuff is simple input, sophisticated output. We handle the complex engineering on the back end, so it's simple. If you have to take, like with me, everything in this movement, I've had to use technology more than half the time to figure out other technology. If you're doing that, technology is not serving you, you're serving technology. And that's what we're trying to say. We want technology that serves, and that's everything that we're trying to build. Make a simple user experience where people can explain what they want, and it directs them. These endless menus and stuff for tech people, if you want that, there's plenty of stuff out there for you. We want user-friendly stuff for the average person.
Yeah, again, you can't be passive about it. If you don't direct where you're going, then you're not going to like where it takes you.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. And I want to have a choice in it. And I know that, these doctors and teachers and engineers and everybody, they want to have a choice in it, all these professions, so they don't get, automated out. Because I believe, and one thing, I've been seeing on social media lately is Elon Musk talking about, by 2036, nobody's going to need money. We're not going to need jobs. And I'm like, well, that's not a good thing. If we take purpose away from people, then boredom breeds trouble. And if the whole world is bored, we may end. We can't do that.
Yeah, Elon Musk is wrong. AI is not going to take over trades. But here, the irony is that those professions that were most reliant upon high levels of intelligence and studying, engineering, medicine, law, teaching, those are the ones most at risk for AI. You can go into AI and say, do me a revocable living trust for the state of Tennessee for the following assets. And 2 minutes later, you've got what would have cost you $1,000 for a lawyer. You go in, you get it notarized, bam, you're done.
Yeah, as long as you're reviewing it and making sure that because I consistently have to correct or make my AI better. I do not believe in the autonomous. I'm deep into AI. I use it all day, every day. And I have to review everything. I create it, and then I was in a discussion the other day. People were talking about these students at Stanford. They're failing them because the pattern recognition is saying AI wrote it, but then when they look into it, half the people they failed, AI didn't write it. It's just their pattern. And I'm like, well, that doesn't need to be autonomous. Anything that is a decision that's consequential to humans needs to be a human decision. AI doesn't need to be making it.
The problem, though, and I agree with you, you do have to review everything that comes over. But the exact same thing is true of an actual lawyer. Lawyers just cut and paste, and lawyers are just as likely to make mistakes as AI. Now, maybe they have a greater level of accountability for those mistakes.
Accountability, that's it.
And for medicine, boy, my last job was in healthcare, and I don't think the medical profession has realized how bad COVID damaged their professional reputation, where they just blindly repeated whatever was told. And, it's like, okay, you went to college for 1,000 years, but you were still wrong.
Well, there was a lot of my wife's in the healthcare, and there was a lot of discrepancy in the healthcare system. They were pushed. A lot of them were pushed. I think if you remember, it was take the shot or lose your job, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If I'm remembering correctly.
But remember, the medical profession was supporting that. The medical profession was saying, no, the vaccine is this, the vaccine is that. And here's the thing, is they may have privately disagreed, but that doesn't help me. If you're pushing wrong information on me as a patient, even though you disagree with that, that's perhaps a greater indictment on the medical profession.
I know there was a lot of discrepancy back and forth between that. But like my wife she almost died. They wanted to put her incubator, and she was in bed, like almost died for 8 weeks, was on oxygen, and it decimated her. She lost her hair and everything after, which is grown back now. But yeah, they wanted to incubate her. She's like, nope, you're not putting me under, because they weren't waking up at the time.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So, is there anything before I wrap this up, and then we can chat a little bit after the show? Is there anything that you want to tell to the audience, or anything that we might have missed that you want to say?
Just if you want to be more knowledgeable about a subject that touches all of our lives, war, please check out my podcast, War 102. It's available all over the place. Start from the beginning, and then it moves on from there. I hope you enjoy it. If not, I get it. And be informed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Paul, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your experience and perspective. I appreciate that our conversation focused not only on military history, but on the leadership principles, strategic thinking, and practical lessons that can help people become better leaders in every area of life. We wish you continued success with War 102, your writing, and your work supporting veterans. And to everyone watching or listening, thank you for being part of the conversation. Until next time, remember, truth isn't partisan, it's patriotic.